And welcome back to Mixed Media Live. We're here for another week of talking about everything art, basically. We're a live show that happens every Monday at 9:30 p.m., or roughly thereabouts, if our technology is in order. But today we got it together. So welcome to all of you regulars out there. Shout out to 909 Crime. I already see in the chat. Um, and thank you for stopping by to spend an hour and a half or so with us, talking about anything art related, whether it's hot takes, philosophy, business, reviews of certain things, random little concepts here and there. Basically a nerd show if you're interested in film, music, or gaming, or the very heavy intersection between all three of those things. And so, yeah, that's who we are at Mixed Media. I suppose then we should introduce ourselves individually. Unfortunately, our gaming guy, my brother Nathan, is out today. He's got finals, so I don't envy him at all. So he's out today, probably studying and doing tons of work. But I guess I'll introduce myself. My name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. I own a company called Ariella, and you can find my website at ariella.co.
Hi, I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and a media composer out here in LA.
Yep, and this is what we do. Now, before we go on, I just wanted to shout out our Discord, which is in the description. The link's in the description. If you're listening to this segment, you're more likely to be listening to it in podcast form. And so if you're listening to it on there, this is a live show. And if you are a pure audio only person, our Discord, which is linked in the description of the podcast, is streaming the podcast live. So you can go ahead and listen to it there if you're doing work or something and you don't want the distraction of video, or if you're in the car and you don't want bandwidth issues or something like that, you can go to our Discord and stream just the audio there. I think the audio quality could use some work, but that's a Discord thing, and unfortunately, I can't control that. But yeah, it's definitely an option. And also just chat on there. You know, if you chat on there, it appears on all the other platforms. I can see it on my little central hub here and respond to it all live, and you get to be part of the podcast essentially. That being said, the best way to help us grow is definitely to first of all, wherever you are, rate us on Apple Podcasts, all that stuff. I think Pandora might have an up and down button. I don't know. Wherever you are, figure out a way to give us some positive feedback or negative feedback, but just leave a comment if you're going to do that, so that I know what to change. And even more importantly, share the particular episodes with people who can learn from them, enjoy them, whatever it may be. That's definitely the best way you can help us out. With that out of the way, we'll start with our little news segment. So, Ben, any interesting news?
Just some smaller things in the film music world. We're going to get the soundtrack by Danny Elfman to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness coming out in 2 days. Of course, Danny Elfman's been making a lot of music headlines recently for his appearances at Coachella. I haven't really attempted to figure out what all that's about, but yeah. So music of that should be coming out soon. Also just announced today that Hans Zimmer is scoring another movie. No shortage of films for Zimmer, of course. He's going to be doing something called The Sun, which is directed by Florian Zeller. I don't know anything about this, but in the brief description of it, it does not sound like a typical, Zimmer epic film. So,
very interesting. Name is very familiar, and I'm trying to figure out why. But that is very interesting. Oh, The Father. That's why. That was a recent. When was that? 2020. Yeah, that was not too long ago. So there we go. I have not seen that, but I remember it popping up on Letterboxd way back then.
So we're getting the father and the son.
Oh, I just realized that. Maybe
I
this is.
mean, that's intentional, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah, there you go. 99 Crime says Hans Zimmer is scoring the next Avengers. Is that a thing?
Not that I'm aware of.
That'd be kind of interesting, I guess. I thought the Avengers sort of musical style was like completely baked in, but that'd be definitely different for sure. Sarcasm. Was hoping in some variation in the Marvel stuff, but anyway. For was that it for the music news? Okay.
Yeah, that's all I've got.
Yeah, for the film news, oh yeah, I want to go over some Baldwin stuff. I haven't gone back into it completely because there's been a lot of stuff happening. You think that this incident would be kind of an open and shut thing, and also if you've been living under a rock, basically, there was a cinematographer. Her name was Helena Hutchins, and she was on the set of a film called Rust. And unfortunately, there was an incident where a firearm was loaded with something, because the fact that it was loaded with a bullet is also in question even today. Loaded with something, and something hit her when the trigger was pulled, question mark. And she then subsequently passed away. Now, we've had many lawsuits filed. Are we going to say something, Ben?
No, it's just interesting to me that you keep saying, like, if the trigger was pulled and loaded with something, like, how much more complicated does this whole thing have to get?
Oh yeah, it
seemed like it's pretty complicated from the beginning. But
the whole thing really exploded into something very bizarre. It got really weird like a month ago, or maybe it's been many months ago. This thing has been dragging on for a while now, actually. And it got really bizarre with like these really bizarre details coming out, and then recently, with all the lawsuits being filed, the earliest lawsuits were the most frivolous lawsuits. I mean, most of them, these people trying to grift off of a dead person, and it's kind of frustrating to see, honestly. People trying to sue tangentially because of like things that they, I don't know. Maybe it's attention-seeking behavior. I have no idea. But frivolous lawsuits, from my eye at least. Then the more serious lawsuits started coming out from people who actually were harmed, like Helena's family, and others surrounding people who were more closely connected to the set conditions and whatnot. So that was very fascinating to see those details come out in actual complaint form, which, you take those things a little bit more seriously, but still with a grain of salt, because that's only seeing one side of the story, right? You don't see the other side until you actually get to proceedings, if these things even get to proceedings, which, if I'm Baldwin and company, there's a lot of settlement cash that I'm keeping on the side to appease whatever things, so that I don't go to discovery, because this story undoubtedly has very bad details in it, as you can imagine, for something like this to happen. And yeah, so basically the update is that the tapes of Baldwin and several other key what you call keys in film, which is like basically your big wigs, your above the line sort of people. They get paid the money and they do the big things. I'm not going to get into it, but a lot of the keys were interviewed by the police right after the incident. When I say right after, I mean like, seemingly like an hour or two right after the incident. So that includes Alec Baldwin, that includes the assistant director, that includes some of the producers as well. And the police department dumped all of the footage of all of it, all at once, at random. No one was expecting it, as far as I know. They just dumped it all. And now there's literally 100 gigs of data that was dropped, I think, early last week, or maybe mid last week, from the case, which is fascinating. obviously don't have time to go through 100 gigs of data and, suss out all the details, because we have texts, we have emails, we have pictures, we have all kinds of stuff. And I'm sure the internet's going to be all over it, because that's what the internet does. But the interesting segments that I did catch were particularly from the interview with Baldwin, and a lot of key observations that I caught when I was watching the bit of it that I did watch. One, the interesting thing is that at the time he did not know that she was dead, very obviously, because he's speaking of her as if she is definitely alive or most likely alive, and that's kind of, it reminds you someone died, right? And so it's a sad thing. And the other thing is, I think in terms of culpability, I think at the time he didn't think he had any culpability, which I think I've said from the start that I don't think he understood even post the questions start being asked, that legal liability for these things may not be what he thinks it is. Like, you may not feel guilty for doing something, or you may not feel like you did something wrong, but letter of the law is different, right? Like, this happens all the time where someone feels as though they did something completely in the right, but it actually was criminal. It happens all the time. In this case, I'm not sure whether he did anything criminal or not. I've said that also from the beginning, because this is a weird special case where you have something that would typically be considered a very straightforward assault, right? Pointing a deadly weapon at someone. That's just an assault, plainly. But it's in an environment where professionally that is controlled. So, like, you have an environment where, the process for doing essentially an intentional assault, right? In a weird way, is a controlled environment. So the typical sort of gut reaction of, like, someone who's familiar with firearms, which is you are responsible for every bullet that comes out of your weapon. The firearms community is extremely adamant about firearm safety. If you've been around it at all, it's like the number one thing that appears even tangentially in things that have nothing to do with firearm safety. It's always repeated. The mantras are always repeated, so people can't possibly understand why this might happen. Or why someone would point an actual firearm at another human being, even in the firearms community. But this is not a good read of this particular scenario, because that's what's been done in Hollywood for a long time now, and it's part of the professional conduct, and there's a whole system around doing so. So it's a little bit different. Now, in terms of letter of the law, he's sort of the thing that's congruent about his story that I find very interesting is that he's very congruent about talking about the actual action of drawing the firearm. So he says, I drew the gun, I pointed it, practicing my shot. So the purpose, he's said, in this tape, and he said since then, was to practice the shot, right? So that's consistent. There are some people who are speculating that maybe he was, I don't know, joking around or screwing around with the gun, although that ultimately might be the case in a sense, but not in the sense that it was, like, purposeless, right? Like, he was, like, just, I don't know, trying to impress someone or something like that. He was practicing the shot they were about to do, and seemingly rushed to do. And he feels the firearm go off in his hand. He's surprised by I think he's surprised by the sound, is what he makes it sound like on the tape. But he's also surprised after the event by the lack of recoil, which I find fascinating. I think what's likely happening there is might be a psychological thing, frankly. I mean, he might have been so distracted by the other things that he didn't realize the gun was jumping in his hand as well, or something like that. I have no idea. But I find that bizarre. And so that puts in question the type of projectile that hit her and all this kind of stuff. And it's a whole thing. But really the update that I want to give here was, if you want to go see the tapes, you can easily find them on YouTube. Go look at them. I'm very likely to do an episode in the future, but I'm kind of waiting for like a much more static presentation of facts, and I don't really want to revisit it. The purpose of revisiting at the front was to say, here's what we know so far, but I don't see the purpose of like, muddying everything and then getting confused in all the details until we have like, a much more solid understanding of at least what the allegations are from different people. The other thing that was in the information dump that was very fascinating was that the Hannah Gutierrez Reed, who was the armorer, if you remember, and it was one of the prime people. I was like, I don't know if that person can avoid being caught up into liability here, because there's a lot of chain of custody broken and a lot of just no stuff that happened that revolves around her. And then we had some twisted details. They're like, maybe not. Maybe there's some protocol on the set that was really screwed up. But some very damaging texts between her father, who is a legendary gunslinger and armorer, Thel Reed. Between her father, and her mentor, whose name is escaping me right now, who Hannah is actually suing right now, her mentor, over the event, which also seems like a frivolous lawsuit. And so the texts are pretty bad in the sense that the incompetence is very on display. Hannah was not prepared to do this role at all. She didn't know anything about these period guns whatsoever. And that actually freaked her out, that she didn't know anything about these period guns, which is something I said at the beginning, was like, this is niche knowledge, like a gun from the 1800s. Like, you made, like, the knowledge of how to operate it, how to take care of it, how to maintain it is pretty niche. And then you add onto the fact that this is a replica gun, it's not even the original, and it's got a slight difference in the safety mechanism, all this kind of stuff. But it was very clear that she was texting her mentor and her dad in a group chat all the time, from the time since before she got on set, about what she can and can't do on the set, what set etiquette should be like, what professional conduct should be like. This is after she's accepted the job, and that's kind of weird. But you'd think that, I don't know, there'd be a minimum floor of acceptable competency for her to be employed, but whatever. That's a whole thing. There's also a lot of talk between the three of them about how drunk they are. I mean, her father's talking about how drunk he is. The mentor is talking about how drunk he is. She's talking about how drunk he is and how they're going to have to get back to each other on information because they're hammered or they're hungover or something like that. So very unprofessional conduct in the midst of a shoot. So all that stuff is there. I'll do some recap in the future. That was just to let you know that there's some interesting stuff that's come out. I just want a lawsuit to actually go to proceedings, because that's the stuff I eat up for sure, and it's the best because when people are under oath and there's evidence being presented to a court and that stuff is being put out there, live time, I can much better analyze what the heck is actually going on. It's usually in an orderly fashion, and all that kind of stuff. So that's my bit. And it looks like Nathan is remotely dropping some news here from his study session. Let's see what this is. This is a news piece from Ars Technica. Let's see what Nathan is remotely telling us. He said the title is Square Enix sells all of its Western game studios and their games to Embracer. Now, I can't really comment on this, unfortunately. I'm not the person to comment on it because I don't know. I've never heard of Embracer. Let's see. Yeah, well, it's in the chat for anyone who wants to see. There you go. But anyway, how was your week, Ben? Because I skipped over that part.
Busy. I mean, our school gets out pretty late. I have class for another 2 weeks. So, but, still kind of busy for the end of the semester, concerts and other things like that.
Yeah. Cool. Concerts, like what kinds of stuff are you performing in?
I had a ensemble concert and then some some like masterclass stuff. So
Cool. Sounds good. For me, I put this on Discord, and I just want to blast this out again for people who are listening to this in post. It's probably not too late, unless you're listening to this like 2 years later or a year later or something like that. But I am scouting for a client who is starting up an independent films sort of distribution channel, and it's a unique opportunity because you can actually get paid to paid for your existing short films that didn't have distribution before, which is almost everyone. So if you want to potentially get a check cut for the rights to your short film or to your feature film as well, I just mentioned short films in particular because I know those never get sold, practically speaking. Hit me up. You can hit me up any way you see fit on Discord. You can even email the mixed media email that's in the description, or you can go to my website ariella.co, and there's like a contact page there and emails there as well, so you can contact me through there. And really the only requirement is that that you have a short that we are allowed to redistribute, and that's pretty much it. And I'll be taking a personal look. I'm the gatekeeper, so just me, you probably could guess at stuff I might like. So if you have friends and stuff like that, you can forward their stuff over to me as well. And the last thing is the last business item is that I am currently in the process of gathering interns. It was an idea that was posed to me by certain people. I love teaching people. So at first I was kind of put off by it because I felt like my company's too small and a little insecure about that. But clearly there was demand because I had tons of responses within the first few days, which was insane. And so by some really cool people, got to interview some of those people. Some of those people I've already invited on board. We're definitely going to have in the future on Mixed Media a Meet the Interns episode where I bring them all on, the gaggle of cool people. But I'm kind of excited about that. If you're interested in an internship, then you know where to find me as well. The clock is ticking much quicker on that one, so hit me up as soon as possible. And I'm going to be teaching a lot of business stuff, a lot of practical, technical skills and stuff like that, while also hopefully bringing up the status of the company and helping me out with a lot of the stuff that really bogs down my days. So there it is. And the last thing is I will be watching perhaps all, I'm scared to say that, all of the pre-2000 Batman films, and two of them are really bad, like notoriously bad. But I will be punishing myself, or maybe I really hope they're so bad they're good. Like Batman and Robin looks promising in the sense that it might be so bad it's good. I really hope so, because it's been a long time since I've discovered such a film. So yeah, but I'm excited for the original, not the original, it's definitely not the original, but the Keaton Batman and its sequel. I'm kind of excited to watch that because I really love cinematic representations of Batman, and I haven't seen those yet. And then post that, I will be heading over to guest co-hosting on a podcast to talk about Batman cinematic representations. I'll be posting a link on our Discord whenever that becomes relevant. And I'll be shouting out Mixed Media for sure. And very last thing is I finished Decalogue, which I've talked about a long time ago. It's 10 hours long. That's why it took me so long to finish. It's 10 1-hour films, technically. But, man, it's freaking fantastic. I don't know what to say. Highly recommend. 99 Crime says, Batman and Robin was like a fever dream between Beetlejuice and Toys R Us. That sounds Hilarious. That sounds promising. Like, seriously, that sounds seriously promising for a very uh, funny cinematic experience. I really hope so. So I don't have to torture myself watching it all the way through. Um, so yeah. But yeah, so Decalogue was great. Highly recommend it. All 10 hours was pure moralizing beauty of films that were not afraid to have a stance and not just to ask questions, but to tell you what it thinks the answers are, which is also part of art, and it's unfortunately missing these days. So I highly recommend Decalogue. Filmmaking is phenomenal. Definitely impacted me. I ended up giving it 4.5 out of 5 the whole series, and on Letterboxd I could also rate each one individually. It was kind of weird. Yeah, mostly in the 4 to 5 range there. So highly recommend. I'll be checking out the filmmaker's other films for sure. Awesome dude. So that's my update for this week. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So if you're watching this in post, this is the end of the segment, and we'll be talking to Ben next about... What are we talking about, Ben?
We're going to be talking about some of the advantages and disadvantages of contemporary commercial music recording techniques.
Sweet. So here we are. We're going to transition, and I'll see you on the other side.
Mixed Media Music.
All right. Welcome to Mixed Media Music. Today we will be talking about the advantages and disadvantages of contemporary commercial music recording techniques. And when I say that, I'm talking about like recording live musicians in a studio, not remote recording. Not just bringing like one person in as a sweetener, we'll call it, which is another technique, but that's kind of a little bit beyond, outside the scope of what we're going to talk about. This is just a discussion of like when you bring a bunch of musicians into a recording studio these days, some of the big techniques that are used. Okay, so maybe not the most broadly applicable topic, but if you are into like using live musicians to record your music, this is good stuff to know, especially if you're doing like orchestral stuff, but it's applicable to non-orchestral stuff as well. And this is obviously an interesting topic for me, both as a composer and as a flute player out in LA. I was actually listening to one of my teachers, not my direct flute teacher, but one of the other flute teachers at my school, who's Heather Clark, who's one of the biggest section flute players around, talking about some of these things the other day. And also, I have an opportunity next Friday to actually do some recording in a smaller studio, not one of these like big, like Fox Studio or whatever. But as part of one of my classes that is focused on, commercial music recording, we are going to be recording arrangements and original compositions by some student composers, and in a real recording studio, and applying these things. So some of these things I've not experienced firsthand, and I will be experiencing them firsthand next week. So good stuff to go over. Okay, so the first thing, and if you've watched this channel at all, you are probably aware that in the commercial music world, pretty much everything, commercial recording world especially, right? Pretty much everything is sight read, which means that the musician will walk in, and I've talked to a whole bunch of people, because there are a lot of teachers in my school who do this for a living. I've gone out my way to talk to them about this kind of stuff. And sometimes when you walk in, beforehand, if you get there early, sometimes the music will be on your stand, and you've never seen it before. And sometimes you'll get there and you'll warm up, and 2 minutes before they start the first note, they'll put it on your stand. So, in general, you have never seen this music before, and you'll never see it again. That's what sight reading is. It's on the page, you're reading it, and that's it. And some composers will take a little bit of time to rehearse things, or they'll give you multiple takes. Sometimes it's just one take. Literally, you turn the page, they say, cue 2M1, you pull up 2M1, and they hit record, and that's it. You get one take, all sight read, and it's recorded. You don't get to go back. Okay. So you might ask what the advantage of doing that is. And I know we've also talked about this before, but just to make it really clear, basically, for all of these things, we have to think about it. The most important thing is that, do they save time? Because time equals money. And film companies do not want to spend money that they don't need to spend. Okay. So, what's the efficiency of sight reading? Well, it doesn't necessarily create a whole lot of efficiency in studio, but what it allows is they can bring the composer in at the last second, and the composer can be writing up to almost literally the last second, right? You may finish the music an hour before, and you rush it. You have your copyists rush to use their templates and get all that stuff into a proper format and print it, and tape it in correctly and get it on a stand. And literally, that's what happens if you're getting it 2 minutes before the downbeat. So why they have to bring the composer in so late in the game and to start writing music, that's a totally different question. But given that is how it goes, this is forcing musicians to sight read gives the composer the maximum amount of time. And also, along those lines, it gives the director and producers more time to say, no, we don't want that, make some more revisions. So that's the pro of it. What are the cons of having your musicians sight read? I think if you're a musician, these are obvious, but they go without. I mean, I should list them anyway. When you are literally, you've never seen something and will probably never see it again in your life. What happens when you play? Okay, you don't know what your role is. You don't know whether what you're playing is supporting, whether it is the lead line, whether you should be kind of behind someone else, supporting someone else, whether you are playing in unison with them. Okay, so you don't know. You can kind of use your musical intuition that you've gained over your career, but that still is not. It's not always going to work the way that your intuition might tell you it will. Then when you're sight reading, it's just that much harder to, especially if you're not going to you don't have a composer who's going to do any rehearsal before hitting record. It's just that much harder to execute properly a lot of these technical things, and it's also that much harder to really make an artistic statement. Right? If I know, I've been working on this Beethoven symphony, right? I know what kind of artistic statement I want to make and how my artistic statement kind of works with the other people I've rehearsed with, right? We're all making a unified statement, and I can shape my own thing in whatever way I want. You have much less room to do that when you're sight reading. You kind of have to react and do it in a way that is good enough without really understanding, the larger picture. So you can't make quite as much of an artistic statement. Yeah, and a lot of it's just reaction instead of pre-planned. What do I as a musician think ought to occur? You're just kind of reacting on instinct. Now you can counteract some of these things to a degree. People who are really good at this stuff, who do it for a living, they practice sight reading, and they do it at this level day in and day out. So they have some, they're better at doing this than the average person is. And you can be a world-class musician and be absolutely terrible at doing this kind of stuff because you've never practiced it. So you need to be both a kind of world-class musician and be dedicated to working on how do I sight read and react really well. But even with a lot of preparation, it still doesn't necessarily produce the greatest artistic result for the reasons I mentioned. So we have two linked techniques, but I'm going to kind of separate them, although they're normally in conjunction with each other. The first thing is recording small sections. So often what will happen when you have a really long, or not necessarily even really long, but something somewhat extended in length, it's really complicated. Instead of recording all of these things, in the entire piece at once, we'll break it up into smaller chunks, and sometimes 4 measures, right? Sometimes 8 measures, whatever the number the composition team thinks is best for recording it. And so what are the advantages of recording only small bits of the piece? Like you kind of turning into a little puzzle, okay? This does increase efficiency in that, if you have something that's really long, right, the more notes you play, the more chances there are for a mistake. And the more mistakes that are made, the longer it takes, in the studio to correct it and get the entire thing perfect. So we kind of focus on smaller things, we're going to have fewer mistakes, and we will take less time and therefore save money. Okay. The other benefit of that is that, again, it's much easier to focus on and like really nail something smaller. So you're more likely to get each individual section to be really good. But there are a lot of negative things about this. This is not necessarily like something unique to contemporary commercial recording. This happens in all recording, and it's kind of happened in all recording for many years. But it's only more prevalent now that technology is so good, and we can seamlessly blend these things so that the audience doesn't hear any gap, right? It sounds like a continuous performance. But what are some of the negative things about this? Well, number one, it's not natural, right? We don't naturally, when we practice, we break things into little bits, but we're trying to play something, we don't do that, right? If you go to a concert, you don't hear, oh, we're going to play the first 4 measures of this symphony. No, that's not what we do, right? We listen to the whole symphony. So it's not natural for musicians to do that. Also, when we're breaking this stuff apart, it's much harder for a musician to get a sense of the big picture. I mean, it's already hard for sight reading, as I said, but we really lose sight of like what the entire thing is supposed to sound like. Yes, we might get each little puzzle piece sounding really nice, but how is that puzzle piece supposed to fit into something else? Is this supposed to grow and develop? And how as an artist, how am I supposed to be able to shape this, right? If I don't know the whole picture, and even if I did know the whole picture, I can't shape the whole picture because I'm only given one little puzzle piece at a time to work on. This is often hand in hand with something called striping. Now, they don't have to go together. You can have an entire orchestra playing one little like 4-bar section, but when you're striping, you're often also just doing small sections. So striping, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this on the show or not, but it's something that is very, very common now. Even 20 years ago, it was not something that is possible to do, but not very common. It is very much kind of the default for a lot of things these days. Now, some composers do not like this; they refuse to do it.
Wait, so what
John
is it?
Williams, right. Well.
Okay.
So, yeah. Let me define it first. So, striping is when we take individual sections of an ensemble, like the brass, and the woodwinds, and the percussion, and strings, and they're separated. They come in at different times of the day or different days entirely, and record only their stuff. Okay, so like I said, some composers are against this. Some composers like John Williams obviously will do none of this except for sight reading. right? He conducts the entire orchestra, and he rehearses before they, or sight reading it, but he rehearses before they hit record. And they record like the entire cue, right? The entire piece. But striping is quite common these days for most composers. Okay, so the advantages of having like just the woodwinds come in and record their parts in isolation. For the people who are going to be doing the mixing of this, it gives them really, really fine control over balance and blend and volume. There's no bleeding at all, right? So I can bring everything out exactly the way I want it to sound, because I have, I have multiple mics on each player, and there's absolutely nothing interfering with it. So that is a good thing. You can really make the blend exactly what you want it to be. Also, this saves time in two ways. It saves time in that, well, if I record something and the woodwinds did really well, but the brass wasn't so great, there's going to be some spillover, right? Some bleed from the mics, and probably we might not be able to use that. So we've wasted good effort from the woodwinds because of less than perfect effort from the brass. That doesn't happen with this because you don't have to worry about some other section dragging the section that's in there down. So again, it saves us time, saves us money. It also saves us money because if you have to hire the entire orchestra, right, and they're all going to sit there for the 3-hour session, but the woodwinds only play for 15 total minutes and the strings play for an hour and a half in total, you're wasting money by paying the woodwind players to sit there waiting for when they actually play. So again, saving money makes sense from a production company standpoint. Why this is not necessarily the greatest thing for the art form itself is incredibly unnatural in that if you have an ensemble, ensembles are meant to play together. Right, as a performing musician, one, you have absolutely, if you combine all of these things, your sight reading, you are recording only a small section, and you're only hearing the other people in your, if you're a brass player, you're only hearing the brass. So you might be just 4 measures, you're sight reading it, and you don't know what the rest of the orchestra is doing. You do your part as best as you can based on what's written, but you really have no sense of what you're contributing to if you do it this way. You also it puts a huge amount of pressure on the musicians for intonation because you have to be really locked in with the tuner instead of just we're gonna kind of follow each other, right? And it's okay if we're going to be a tiny bit sharp because we're all together. You can't do that because I don't, if I'm slightly sharp, well, I have no idea what the strings are going to do tomorrow when they come in to record. They're probably not going to be slightly sharp. You also, as a musician, it's important to respond to each other. If let's say I'm playing flute and the line is playing in unison, doubling the violin melody, I want to listen to what the violins are doing and match their phrasing, match how they're shaping the line, making sure that I'm kind of blending in with them in the correct way. Well, one, I don't even know what the violins are playing or not, and two, even if I did, right, I can't match how they're going to play it because they're not there. So we also like to respond to each other. Like someone plays something, in a particular way, and it inspires me to, shape what I'm going to do after that in response. You get some of that within your own section, but not across the entire ensemble. So again, we're kind of hurting the musician's ability to craft something artistic. And the final thing we've talked about definitely is the click track. So in a contemporary commercial recording setting, you generally have a single earphone. You can pick which side it goes on. So you have one ear, you can in theory listen around you. The other ear, you are getting a click track, which is kind of like a metronome essentially. And sometimes you'll get feed from other things too, like you can hear like pre-done like electronic instruments or pre-recorded like drum tracks. Okay, sometimes that will be in there as well. So what is the benefit of this? It's pretty obvious from a film composition or video game composition point of view. It definitely forces everyone to stay in time, and it allows you to sync hit points, right? Things where you need like notes to fall at a very particular moment, and allows that to occur. There are old ways of doing this, like punches and streamers, but John Williams uses to try and kind of, he free conducts it, right? Doesn't have a click track normally, and he's kind of looking at the picture and he tries to line it up like that. But this way, there's absolutely no question. You can say, I want the metronome to be at 63.446 beats per minute, and that is exactly what comes out, and the players have to play exactly to that. And the note should land exactly at the right time.
So does that not affect the ability to? I don't know if these click tracks are like super programmed, but like does that not affect the ability to like vary tempos like on purpose? Within...
there's no variance in tempos. Now they're varied mechanically in that beforehand you set it to exactly this beat it's 65 and the next beat it's 66.678 whatever, and then it goes back. You can have that detail if you choose to and or need to do it.
Interesting.
It's also as most things these days you're going to they're going to have these overlaid virtual instruments, either to help boost the sound, augment the sound of the acoustic instruments, or you need all this like non-real percussion, right? You need these drum tracks. And it's the only way to kind of make sure that these things that are created only on a computer will line up exactly with the real musicians. Some downsides to this, obviously, it can kind of lead to some robotic playing, right? Musicians, we much prefer to have a conductor and also kind of be listening to each other for pulse. But here we've got the metronome in our ears. It also, the musician is forced to listen to that, and naturally, right, we're listening in like 360 degrees, right? We're listening to people in front of us, behind us, to the side of us. We're limited. Your musician is limited in their ability to do that when they have one of their ears dedicated to metronome, essentially. So they're not hearing the same way that they would when they go and play in a concert hall. So again, it's kind of unnatural in that way. Yeah, I guess one other thing I should add, especially in the world of video games, and I didn't mention this earlier, but striping does have one really important benefit in video games in particular, which is that a lot of times video games will, when they loop things, they like to add elements, right? To vary things based on like, well, we're still in this scene, but something has changed, right? We've talked to a new character or whatever, battling some new character, whatever. So you can do that very easily. You don't have to like record, one take with just the strings and then the next take with strings and brass. You just record them each separately, right? You have the strings play on the string day or string session and the brass play on the brass session. And then it's very easy to layer those when you actually put the music with the game. You're going to have the strings, just repeat the strings, but in the second time, whatever changes on screen, just layer the for the brass on top of it. Yeah, so these are pretty much like the big commercial recording techniques. Recording in small sections is not necessarily restricted to the commercial world, like I said, but very prevalent in the commercial world as well. So these are things you want to keep in mind if you are looking into film scoring and using live musicians one day, or if you are someone who wants to get into the commercial music world as a performer or in any kind of capacity. It's good to know that this is how these things are done and what some of the advantages and disadvantages of them all are. Like I said, well, other than sight reading, right? You can practice sight reading. I've done lots of sight reading. In the group that I'm in that is going to be doing this recording next Friday, we sight read these composers' music, each week. So we've gotten sight read plenty of commercial stuff. But these other things I don't actually have firsthand experience with, and hopefully, I will get some firsthand experience with them. They certainly make, from what I understand and what I can imagine, they kind of make the task of the recording musician difficult and different than other forms of music that they are going to play. But again, if you're really hiring the best of the best, they are used to these things, and as much as they may not like all of them, they do their best to, and they know how to best kind of adapt and counteract them to the extent possible. But I think still what you see is kind of this balance between maximizing art and maximizing or minimizing budget. We'll say maximizing art and minimizing budget. Kind of, as in all things in film, that's kind of, I think, how it works. But that's kind of how it plays out in the music world, the music side of film and in video games.
Very, very interesting. I still find it like baffling why film music gets like the short end of the stick when it comes to scheduling and even credits, like you've explained before, which blew my mind. And it just, wow, I don't know how you guys not blow a gasket, because that would make me very mad.
Yeah, well, a lot of people, I think the thing that particularly bothers people these days is the explosion of striping, because that's the most recent of these things to enter the realm, and it's in some ways the least natural of all of these things. So a lot of people really dislike that. Sometimes striping also will occur where they actually have everyone in the orchestra in, but something is kind of complicated, so you'll just sit around while the other people play. And I have heard that that's the most stressful part of the entire job, because you sit there waiting and kind of listen to what everyone else is doing, and then you're like, wow, now everyone's got their eyes on me, hoping I don't make a mistake. And it is a stressful job. The kind of line in Hollywood is that it's 90% incredibly easy and boring stuff, right? Stuff you don't have to, you could have played in middle school, and 10% absolute terror. So, but that's where you make your money, right? It's stuff the 90% that anyone can do, but only the best can do the 10% that is sheer terror.
Terrifying. Yeah. All right. Is that it?
That's all I've got.
Sweet. So if you're listening to this in post, you can check out a whole bunch of Ben's episodes and podcasts and whatever in their own playlist on our YouTube in particular. I think that's the only place that has playlists. So check out our YouTube channel. Link is in the description. You'll find a playlist called Ben Costello on Music. And there you can listen to his thoughts on a whole bunch of other stuff. With that, we're going to go to our Arguing with Reddit segment where I'll be reacting to I don't know what. So, see you then. Here we go.
Mixed Media Movies.
And welcome back to Mixed Media. We just heard a great segment from Ben about recording music and all the interesting changes that are happening, all the difficulties and the pros and cons of different strategies of going about it. And so if you want to check that out, you can check out our channel or go to our podcasting channel. I don't know what you call those things. Stream? I don't know. Whatever you call them. You can go there and you can check out his episode on that. But for right now, I will be reacting to some hot takes about I don't really know what. And if you're unfamiliar, the way Arguing with Reddit works is typically my co-hosts find me, and we rotate every week, a hot take from somewhere in some corner of the internet, likely Reddit, because why not? I mean, Reddit is ripe for such things. Some very interesting people definitely, I don't know what the right word is, form over there. And so you find some very interesting takes on there. So what I'll be doing is I'll be picking their hot takes that they found for me that I haven't seen, minus the one that I found for myself. Now today, Nathan's not here. Our gaming guy is not here. So instead, I found an extra one for myself. So I'll be reacting to that. So without further ado, let me pop in the first one. So this one is from Producer Wife. Let's see what this one is about. I think this is Producer Wife. Here it is. And sorry if it's not the most smooth whenever I'm editing my own. It takes a little bit more brain power. So here we go. So, is this? Oh, this might be Ben's. I think this might be Ben's. You want to give me a rundown?
Yeah, so this person says, it seems like every time he goes to watch a movie, the screen gets darker and darker in action scenes, and that he can't properly, or they, I don't know the gender, they can't properly see what's going on. They want to, and they feel like this phenomenon is only increasing every year. And they want to know whether films are intentionally shot that way for an artistic reason or a budget reason, or whether this is something that the theaters are doing.
You did. There we go. Fantastic topic. Definitely a topic that I took for granted until recently, because I had not personally witnessed the phenomenon until, was it this year or maybe it was last year or something like that. And it was kind of shocking to see what state certain cinemas are in. And I'm not sure if you'll notice it year by year like this. That seems a little dramatic. If you're going to the same theater, I'm not sure. I don't know the progression of cinema screens. But what I do know is that I've noticed a few cinema screens here in New York City, of all places, that are dark. And again, this is not my area of expertise. I'm not a projectionist or a, screen person, whatever you call them. But my understanding is that a lot of these screens, they get darker over time. And some of them are dark to begin with. Now, the composition of these screens is not what you think. It's not a simple white sheet that's just, hanging up on there. That screen, first of all, is very heavy. Extraordinarily heavy. It weighs a lot. It's very thick, and it's got a few special things about it. One, it's lined with silver, hence silver screen. It's also partly what makes it very heavy. And it's also what partly makes it extremely expensive. Now, why is it lined with silver? It's lined with silver because, excuse me, silver is extremely reflective. If you think about the more expensive mirrors, they're made of silver because of the reflective properties of the silver. I don't know if, again, the particular details of the density of the silver. I mean, I see these stats when I look up when I was trying to find a screen for my own home stuff. I got my head around it for my purposes for the money that I can spend on such things, but I have no idea in a cinema, the particular specs and details and all that kind of stuff. The other interesting thing about the screens is that they're perforated, which people don't know. This is just a fun fact that's not related to this at all. But they have little tiny holes in the screen, little tiny holes to let sound come through. Because why? Because there are speakers behind there. Massive speakers. In fact, the biggest speakers in-house are behind the screen. Did you know that, Ben?
No, I was going to say, you've talked about the silver in the screen before, but you haven't mentioned that. That's actually very interesting.
Yeah, and next time you go to a theater that at least has a sizable enough screen, because our brains are very good at masking the effect, which is kind of the point. Think about where the sound is coming from when people talk on screen, particularly when you have like A/B cutting where you're going back and forth between people. Usually what you'll have is one character on the right of the screen, and on the other, when you cut to the other character responding, it'll be on the other side, left, right. The sound will not come from left, right in an extreme way from like the house. It'll come from left, right of the screen. And you'll notice it if you try to notice it next time you go to a theater. But it's because the screen itself has directionality. And the sound, they're designed that they come from where the sound comes from on picture, which is kind of insane, but is really cool. So yeah, that's why the screen is perforated. And you can buy these perforated screens to build a home theater where you can put, your own speaker system behind the screen. Apparently, for home theaters that are considered legitimate, that is utterly required. That is like one of the top things that you have to do. I don't have that kind of money right now, so that's not what I do, unfortunately. But yeah. So in terms of the darker issue, I don't know if that's what this person's experiencing per se, but what I can say is that there are some cinemas that aren't investing clearly in whatever maintenance is required, or what's probably the more unfortunate thing to these cinemas is they might have to replace their screens. And these screens can be each a few $1 million. So they're quite expensive. Now, what can happen to these cinemas, unfortunately, and this is the kind of precarious situation movies are in general, is a death spiral. Because what might happen is that the cinemas aren't doing well, and they're not bringing enough money, and they didn't financially plan well, and they don't have enough backup plans and contingencies. And so when it comes time to replace their capital expense, which is a screen, which they already know, by the way, any of these chain cinemas, they already have a formula that tells them when they could expect to have to buy a new screen and the capital requirements required for replacing that screen, and then there's a whole formula to save a certain amount of money per month, and then what type of account to put it in. You do this with real estate, you'll definitely do it with cinemas. 99 Crime says they don't use projectors anymore. No 10K super projector. That's great. Actually, no, it is still a projector. It's just projected on a silver screen, literally. Like, the projector is projecting it onto the silver screen. So it's not a display, it's a projection. Actually, digital projectors tend to be, the norm is 1080. People don't know that, but the norm for digital projectors is 1080, which is a whole other topic that I'll get into some other day. But long live film projection. The problem, the death spiral that we could get into is that they're not bringing in enough money, and then they think that they put off this expense for whatever reason for something else, whether it's upgrading the, snack area to make it look more enticing, or, if you ever see a cinema upgrade its outdoor facade and indoor facade, which I've seen, before they update their sound and visual system, they are potentially entering the death spiral, because they've taken the money they should have invested in replacing their screen that might be getting darker and dilapidated and whatever, and they've placed it somewhere else where it shouldn't have gone. 1080, what the heck? Yeah, I'll cover that on some future episode as to like what the true reality of resolution, and it's a whole technical topic, but it's not as bad as you think, because projection is a magical thing that does a bunch of analog things to digital signals. But that's a whole story for another day. And so, you know, the interesting thing here is that a lot of cinemas, I think, have opted for this, from what I'm seeing in the forums, from complaints from other people. Apparently, in my home theater back in Jersey, I did not suffer through that, which I'm very thankful for, that AMC Freehold did the right things with their cinema. But I've come across it, and it's horrible. It makes the picture look amateur, which is weird when you're like sitting in like a multi-million-dollar setup that's supposed to display the film in its native format. You know, that's the native format of the film. You best show the film in its native format, then, you know, in all its glory, which is unfortunate. So the more you know, right? Like I always say on the show, when you get educated about these things, one day I'll have to talk about. There's a great if anyone knows who G.K. Chesterton is. If you want to know my thoughts on a lot of things, just go read some G.K. Chesterton. But one interesting concept that I was reading one of his essays the other day, and one interesting concept that he talks about is advertisement. Great essay on advertisement that really changed the way I thought about things, and really consolidated a few ideas that I had about advertisement. That's a whole other thing, but that's to say that things have moved in such a way where the customer is told to buy something not in light of their in light of the good in the thing, right? But in light of some lie, right? We lie all the time for advertisement, and we say the truth of the matter doesn't matter because people are stupid and they're machines, and you just have to input stimulus A to get return B out of stupid little human machines, right? This I heavily disagree with. I think a lot of the grassroots movements that are happening in marketing in general are moving away from that, thank God. But unfortunately, the big corporate vibe is still that. And unfortunately, that applies to the cinemas as well, in that they think people don't actually care about the screen. You know, people don't actually care about, you know, these things that they definitely don't notice, right? I don't know. I would like to see a study, because it doesn't tend to work that way if you do the studies properly. So, yeah, it's a sad thing, but cinema is in a sad state right now. So demand better. That's what we always say here. Demand better. You know, tell your AMC theater, what the heck are you doing? You just reinvented the lobby, but your screens are getting dimmer. So, yeah, that's really sad. Go ahead.
So it's interesting to me, though, if you read this thread, that the original poster seems to think that, like, they noticed it most in action scenes, and some of the comments were that people seem to think that now that, you know, action scenes are so heavily cut, that actually seems to exacerbate, like, the lack of lighting, I suppose, darkness.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Action editing is also like in an abysmal state these days. It is horrible. It is very hard to watch. It literally hard to watch. Like, you know, you'll be hard pressed to find a modern throwaway action movie that doesn't like make you want to, like, I don't know, leave because you're getting seasick from how much cutting is happening in all these scenes. There's the thing with filmmaking, and the thing with art in general, probably, you know, this is what I know, is that a lot of things affect the audience in ways that you don't, like, they won't be able to vocalize back at you in the way that you'll understand it unless you're attuned to the way audiences internalize things. So this person may very well be talking mostly, like, most of the effect that that is thinking things are too dark, or they can't understand what's happening, or think they can't see things. Part of that might be the screen, and part of that might be the trend in editing that's existed for, like, way too long at this point in action editing, that I thought was going to go away, but it hasn't. And so, yeah, that might also be the case, which is a sad thing as well, because the heavy cutting is typically a lazy thing because you're really bad at shooting action. You have a director who doesn't know shooting action. I don't know shooting action, but I also don't write action things, and I don't typically shoot them. So, not that I don't want to, but before I do that, you best believe I'll be doing a study and practicing and all that kind of stuff, as you need to do things well. And unfortunately, the Jason Bourne series, which brought this upon us, actually does quick cutting well, and you can see a great there's a great video on YouTube about this. I think it might be by Every Frame of Painting, about how Jason Bourne's action editing, that sort of quick cutting style, is much better executed in that film and much more stylized. It feels more like a style and a choice than a workaround for bad choreography and bad cinematography. So you can go check that out if you want to see that. And then also check out anything that Jackie Chan has done and tell me, why do you need quick cutting to make something look compelling? You don't. You need commitment. That's what you need. So there you go. Let's see. So this
Lots of interesting stuff. Lots of interesting stuff, Irving.
Thank you. All right, so here's the next one. This one's from Producer Wife. See if I can get that in here. Again, editing my own. Okay. So let's see what this one says. So this one says, James Cameron is not that great. Ooh, that's a spicy take. Let's get into it. There, I said it. Alien is better than Aliens. Avatar is just Pocahontas. No duh. Titanic is meh. All his movies are technical achievements of the time. I will fully admit that. Titanic pushed the boundary, as did Avatar, but he thinks Sarah Connor is tougher than Wonder Woman, and he takes credit for creating Ripley. He'd do much better to be a producer on something original. He's clearly capable of setting the bar of what filmmaking can achieve. Terminator was the literal result of a fever dream onset by food poisoning. I could barely give him credit for it. I fully expect he's a nice person. People say he's nice and down to earth. He probably is really cool to hang out with. 2, I am also not saying he sucks and I hate him. I would probably freeze up if I met him. I'm just so tired of hearing how amazing Avatar wasn't and how Titanic is the greatest movie of all time. James Cameron is an extremely polarizing figure in filmmaking in general. It's weird because you'll never see that in the stats, and I think that's kind of telling. You won't see it in the box office, you won't see it on Rotten Tomatoes from either the audience or the critics. You won't see that there. You won't see it on Letterboxd from either the audience or the critics. You see it on forums, which makes me think that there is a large minority of people who feel the way that you do, who are very passionate about that feeling. And I can totally understand that and appreciate it, because I think for the beginning of my dive into film and falling in love with film, I was always searching for that thing that was new, that was completely different from everything else, because how did I get into film was with watching things that I didn't know was possible with film, spoken ways that I didn't know was possible, not necessarily not blockbuster. I mean, these were blockbuster films by and large, but blockbuster films that didn't take the blockbuster formula and just repeat it, right? But there's not, in maturing and in watching films, there's so many different ways to approach filmmaking, and some of that is going to look very different from others. And I think you can learn to appreciate. I think I've used this analogy before. I like to compare it to a roller coaster, right? So, you're on a roller coaster. You might have ridden the roller coaster 10 times. Maybe that's a poor way to put it, but you see the element coming forward. You see the airtime hill, you see the loop, you see whatever, the first drop, whatever it may be. You see it coming, you know it's coming. You may even know all the stats for it beforehand. You may know it's 150 feet tall. But do you really know what 150 feet feels like until you're on top of that 150 feet? And do you really know what that coaster's first drop really feels like until you traverse it, right? Until you traverse the particular elements within it. And I think that's a good analogy because you can have cookie cutter pieces per se, which is what James Cameron is often accused of. You can have cookie cutter pieces that are extremely well executed. And while I think it might be a personal preference thing, of course, I'm not like, I'm not the objective guy or something like that. I don't want to come off like that or anything like that. So feel free to disagree with me. But, you can have these really cookie cutter pieces that are just really great. So you said it yourself, Pocahontas, right? Now, a lot of people don't like Pocahontas. I haven't seen Pocahontas since I was way too young to even understand what the heck was going on in Pocahontas. So I can't comment on that.
The Disney film itself,
yeah,
I found it. I couldn't finish it when I tried to watch it like a year ago.
Okay, maybe Pocahontas isn't as loved as I thought it was, but
visually, it's probably the best of the classic animated Disney films. Visually, it's gorgeous, but like watchability is very. It's got so many like historical and like racial inaccuracy. It's just unwatchable.
Yeah. Well, so be that as it may, maybe I'll use a different example here. Star Wars, right? Star Wars is very well beloved, but Star Wars is a hero's journey classic. I literally could just pull out the hero's journey and just detail it for you within episodes and then within the series. Like I can do it like on both levels.
and that's by design too. And like George Lucas freely admits that. Exactly.
And I would never say that it's wrong for him to follow the hero's journey. You know why? Because it's like if you ever you want to really get into stuff like this, I highly recommend you look up the concept called typology, right? It's often used in like biblical study and stuff like that, but you can view a lot of things in a typological lens, right? And there are certain things that are just human pattern, right? The hero's journey is not even a specifically, there are certain cultures that are famous for it, but you'll find it in cross culture and cross time. The same structure, more or less. Like you'll have little variations here or there, but ultimately it's the same structure, right? And that's because it's speaking to a very deep and important human truth about advancing yourself, right? Let's see. Sorry, got distracted for a moment. And so it's not that these things are predictable or cookie cutter that makes them perhaps boring to you. It might just be the way that they traverse them that you don't like. So speaking specifically to James Cameron, he is very much into these very like archetypal stories. Obviously, like he very clearly is purposefully leaning into these human archetypal stories, but he's filling these structures with, I think, in my opinion, with very beautiful stuff. Is it stuff that's gonna like change my life? Well, some of it might. Like some of the imagery might. Some of the way we traverse these sort of archetypal stories might. Because these stories always do, right? Like these heroes' journeys stories always tell us something that we need to know about life. They always say something. There's always a moral point at the end of it. So we see that with these very archetypal stories as well. I think it would be bad to say that they're bad just because they fit those molds. I think if you took Avatar, for example, which is maybe like the most archetypal of them all. I mean, we have like it is literally Pocahontas, and Pocahontas is literally many other things. You know, like these things are like to the T what they're mimicking, right? This sort of archetypal thing that they're mimicking. But the thing is, it's reaching for these really high concepts of like difference, you know, and I guess these high concepts of commonality and humanity. Although in Avatar, obviously, we don't have humans as being the other group, but it's this sort of group theory, right? Like this idea of in group and out group and leaving your tribe, and these things are like primal. You know, like these are primal ideas that are being explored. And so, yeah, Avatar is not anything special from a story structure perspective, and not anything special from a like what happens next perspective. You know exactly what's going to happen next every point during the film, but it's the sense of wonder, the sense that we're speaking to these truths that we need to be reminded of time and time again, you know, in order to learn the same ancient lesson over and over again, you know, essentially, that we seem to want to beat into each generation, you know, and probably for good reason. And so, yeah, that's my perspective on that. I think James Cameron is actually pretty great, in my opinion, for what he is. I don't think he blows my mind as much as for some filmmakers, but he really doesn't bother me. I look forward to anything that he puts forward. And also, he makes tons of money. Tons and tons and tons of money. He also occupies a space that is very empty right now, which is the family film. And I really, really am sad about that. And so I'm really hoping that he comes back with more family films for families to enjoy together that's not too stupid for the adults and takes the children's intellect seriously enough without being too challenging. So, yeah.
Wait, Marvel isn't a family film, Irving? Is that not what you're supposed to sit down and buy with your family, buy the TV and enjoy?
I'm not going to rant about Marvel.
Fun for the entire, fun for all ages.
Well, sorry, Marvel. That's I don't consider you family films. I'm sorry, but I said it. These are. Oh, not going to get into it as much as I want to. Oh yeah, actually, so producer Rife sent me a message about that. Let me pull it back up real quick. About this take, about the first comment or one of the comments. I think one of the comments by the OP. Let's see here. All this blathering gets cut in the final podcast, if you're wondering why you don't hear it. Let's see if I can find it. I think it has to do with J.J. Abrams. JJ, where are you? No, I don't see it. Oh, the second comment, apparently, I'm being told. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, so the second comment says, gray water. Okay, I see. Gray waste is actually what it is. Okay. We're back. So so the second comment here says, doesn't deserve the hate. However unoriginal you think some of his films are, he's a brilliant director and a brilliant storyteller. I've never watched anything by camera that didn't fail to hook me in and get me emotionally involved with the characters in the story. I'd say him having such successful films like Avatar, where with what are considered such unoriginal and tired storylines, is a testament to his skill. People talk about Avatar, be like, no, he's a con artist. It's Dances with Wolves, and he's ripping off off these helicopters from this video game Halo. I don't know what that's a reference to. Oh, it's a reference to Avatar, the helicopters. Yeah, they kind of look like Halo avatars, helicopters. I really don't care about the intellectual wrangling outside the fourth wall, as long as what's put in front of me is really entertaining and interesting. Cameron can make a film about anything. I know I'll probably really like it. J.J. Abrams can make a film about absolutely anything, and I know I'll only sort of think it's an okay film at best. I like the jab at J.J. Abrams at the end. That's funny. But yeah, that's my point in a nutshell, pretty much. Were you going to say something?
No, it's interesting. I mean, I don't really know much of J.J. Abrams' work other than his work on Star Wars, so I can't really comment.
Yeah, I feel like J.J. Abrams is sort of a James Cameron and what's his face? Spielberg, mostly Spielberg. I feel like he's like 70% Spielberg, 30% James Cameron in the way that he wants to approach films. Unfortunately, though, I feel like he's actually has a lot of latent talent, and unfortunately, I think he's taken on projects that mostly snuff that latent talent out. One of the films that I remember, I think this might be an unpopular opinion based off of what I think the general consensus is, but the second Star Trek film of the new trilogy, so the second one of the new trilogy, to me, is a film that I can go back to learn about pace. The pace is like ridiculous. It's breakneck. You know, it's like in a good way. Like it is not letting up 1 second of the film, and it never feels fatiguing, which sometimes that pace can feel. Star Wars. J.J. Abrams directing Star Wars can feel fatiguingly breakneck in that capacity, but can feel quite roller coaster and just ridiculous and in its chaotic yet ingestible tone when it came to Star Trek, which I don't know if that's a spicy opinion or not, but yeah, I could talk about the Star Wars films and J.J. Abrams forever. I have lots of opinions.
I think everyone does.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's your job if you talk about films at all to have many opinions about the new Star Wars. Well, new. They're pretty old now, I guess. Star Wars films. I have lots of them. I really want to like if Disney approached me right now, about the only thing I would say yes to is if they said, "Listen, we have the second film, and man, we don't understand why people hate this stuff, but could you really resurrect this series in the third film?" I could do it. I promise I could do it. There are so many things that could have been done to resurrect the new. And then, sorry to go on the rant here. They decided that they were going to do everything wrong for the literally.
They made everyone hate it. They pleased nobody.
Exactly. They decided everything bad from the first two, everything that the many camps of people didn't like in the first two films. We're going to take it all and we're going to put it into one film, and we're going to curse J.J. Abrams by forcing him to make this this terrible, awful, just disgrace of a movie that the third film is. That film is just, wow, it's really bad. Yeah, not a worthy entry. So that's a rant for another day, for sure. Maybe when the new Star Wars film comes out, I'll do like some sort of grand overview of where we are now, from my filmmaker's perspective.
24 days away from Kenobi coming out, the Disney Plus series, but not a film, but
yeah, maybe that'll be an occasion. I'll probably force myself to watch them again. We'll see. I don't want to, but if you want to see that, let me know in the comments, and maybe I'll force myself to watch them again. We'll see.
Well, but they're so worth 1 through 6 are so worth watching.
Yeah, that's not the one. Those aren't the ones I would have to to force myself to rewatch. Okay. Let's see. On the next one here. This one is from myself. So this is the last one for the night. Let's plop it in. Let's see, where is it? There we go. So this one I found for myself, so I already know what this one is. And I picked it because it was related to the news item that I was talking about earlier in the first part of the stream, which is about Alec Baldwin. because I find the discussion around this very fascinating, from a like legal perspective, from a film perspective, from like a just moral perspective. I find it fascinating because I think most of the time people don't really know what they're talking about from all those different perspectives. And I think I think the issue is actually much more of a complicated issue than I think people give credit. I personally, I'll just say this up front before I talk about the various opinions in here. I personally think that pretty much all the people who touched the gun have some sort of culpability here, or were supposed to touch the gun have some sort of culpability here, because there's a very clear supposed chain of command that happens on pretty much every set, from what I've seen. From people who've been in the industry for decades, and but yet we have these interesting conversations where I think people want to find one boogeyman, to point their finger at and get mad at and say, this is the person. It was definitely not this person who's responsible. I don't think that this is the kind of incident that has that conclusion, though, in my humble opinion. So there's that. So, okay, so let's see some of the comments here. So there's an opinion article, I believe, in The Hill. I actually did not read the Hill article. I just went straight for the comments because I was interested. Is the Alec Baldwin shooting a homicide? Now, that's kind of a weird question because it was literally a homicide. Like, a homicide just means, like, one person killed another. Homicide does not have any, like, indication of guilt. When you say a homicide has been committed, there's no implication per se of, like, a murder or a what's the word I'm looking for, or like manslaughter or something like that, or reckless endangerment ending in death or something like that. Homicide is just one person caused the death of another person. Okay, so yeah, so in the comments here, let's take a look at this first person's comment. Boring Net says, possibly negligent homicide, depends on the investigative findings. This bothers me. He wasn't pointing the weapon. He was trying to remove it from the holster and went off. Why? I've asked several gun owners if they've ever discharged their weapon pulling it from the holster, and they say that's a rookie mistake. Alec claims he's used gun for 30 years. Was he impaired and that's why the gun went off? Drunk, high, sick? Or did he lie about his experience to inflate his ego and forego safety training? Should he even have been holding the weapon at all? Now, there's a lot of presumption of fact in here because I think there's a lot of details here that are disputed that people don't realize are disputed. So actually, I'll go through that first. So, did it go off while he was drawing the gun? That's pretty disputed because he himself has been very inconsistent about when exactly the gun goes off. Fun fact, he has been inconsistent compared to his police tapes, compared to the interview he gave with Stephanopoulos. Later, he's been inconsistent as to who gave him the gun. So we have a lot of disputed facts here going on. So we don't know when it went off. Did he miss training? Was he supposed to go to training? Was he asked to go to training? I actually don't know the answer to that because the only person who's claimed that he missed training was the person training him, but she's also under a lot of legal and criminal pressure here. He has not disputed it, which makes me think that's somewhat true, but he also has pressure to require himself to go there. So what I'm saying is there could be a third scenario where neither party talked about training. You see what I'm saying? And that would put culpability on both of those people because Alec Baldwin's a producer and he should be on top of that. This is his film set and he can be sued for negligence of not requiring that training to begin with. So it's a thorny situation overall. So yeah, let's see what else. 30 years of experience. Yeah, it's pretty undisputed. Okay, yeah, so there are some disputed facts in here. Now, I want to pull this apart because this comment was interesting because I think there are a lot of things in here that aren't very clear from not even just the factual perspective, but from other perspectives. So, it is actually funny you ask someone if they discharged their firearm while pulling it from a holster. these events are very serious events. like accidentally shooting a gun is something that like you tell your buddies about, like, you know, for like, I don't know, the next rest of your life, if you ever do it, right? Like, it's not like something that just happens on occasion, right? Like, that's not something that's why people have such a visceral reaction in the firearms community to this thing happening, because likely they don't even have a story about their gun going off without them intending it to, even if they've been shooting guns for 30 years. You know, I don't know of many people, you know, that are vocal voices in the community who have experiences like that. And if they do, it's the one time that they talk about ad infinitum to display the mistake that they make that no one should ever make, right? So that's a like gun culture perspective for you to have. But in the sense that it's a rookie mistake, it is the most likely time where most people, when these incidents do occur, which is very infrequently, that is when they typically do occur, is when the gun is usually being put back into a holster, not being drawn, but when it's being put back. And the reason why is because a lot of modern pistols don't have a separated safety from the trigger. So the trigger is the safety. I'm not going to explain the concept. It's technical. But basically, for a lot of modern guns, like, you know, your modern Glocks and whatever, the trigger is the safety. So as long as the trigger is pulled back beyond its break point, it will fire. So yeah. So, you know, that's why when you reholster the gun, often what happens is like your shirt will be partly in your holster, and if you're rushing when you're putting it back, maybe the shirt catches on the trigger, or there was something that got in the holster, like a twig or something like that, for whatever reason, something got inside the holster, and you're putting your gun back in the holster, and bang, you end up at the very least burning yourself, likely. Or worst case scenario, you end up shooting yourself, which is very, very bad. So that's the most likely scenario for a unintended shot going off. So that's why they say it's a rookie mistake, because you're told to always check whether your holster is clear, and then to put your gun back slowly, because why are you in a rush when you're putting your gun away? Presumably when you're on the range and you're going to leave now, right? Like, there's no rush to put your gun away. So, yeah. However, this was drawing, which is a little bit different. Now, if you don't have finger discipline, which I assume he did not, because I've seen some footage of him practicing with no trigger discipline, that's a whole different story. You may put your finger way too early on the trigger when you're not ready to fire. So the rule is you put your finger on the trigger only when you're ready to actually fire. So even if you're in an emergency situation, like let's say you're in a life-threatening situation, you need to draw your gun, right? The protocol is still to pull the gun with your finger off the trigger, and only when your sights are on target do you put your finger on the trigger to pull the trigger. And this is called indexing. So you hold the gun like this with your finger like parallel to the trigger instead of inside the trigger guard. So that being said, if he's practicing, his finger should always have been indexed, in my humble opinion, regardless of, you know, I think people are being a little bit too harsh in terms of like a bullet finding its way into the gun. What I can't understand is like certain other safety precautions that he did not follow. Like, why was his finger inside the trigger guard when he was just simply practicing, or when there was a human being in front of him? You know, these are things that bother me, you know, and seem to bother a lot of armorers who work on set for a long time. You know, you're not supposed to, you know, point the gun ever at another human being unless it's a very specific certain circumstance with very specific protocol, and this was not one of those situations, apparently. So, yeah, that's bothersome. So, in terms of the gun just going off, the other thing, though, is that this was not a modern firearm. You know, it has a safety, actually. And not only does it have a safety, but it has a safety that was modified from the original gun's safety to work in a lot different way, in such a way that the gun basically does not go off like that. It doesn't just like go off. I'm not going to go into the detail. You can check out, I talk about that actually in the episode I did on the death of Helena Hutchins. It's a 3-part series. You can go check that out for more details. So, yeah, it's it's not quite that simple in terms of the gun going off. That I think is one of the least likely claims that Alec Baldwin makes. It's not impossible, but it's hard for me to wrap my head around. And as far as I can see from commentary from people in the industry, people sort of make fun of him for that claim because it's a little bit outlandish. But maybe there could be details I have no idea about that may separate him from liability for pulling the trigger when he was just practicing. Yes. So let's see what else was said here. And that he's been practicing for 30 years. So I've seen articles from people in the industry also talking about how there are safe people who follow the rules and people who ignore the rules. And you can believe this or not, but I've seen several industry people, credible sources, in my opinion, that have said that Alec Baldwin has never been one of those people to follow the rules. So if you haven't been following the rules for 30 years, then you're not going to follow the rules this time, right? So, that would make sense to me. It's not like he spent 30 years on the range where you're going to get yelled at by a range officer for not being extremely particular about the rules on the range, but you're a big time actor on a set where no one's going to talk down to you. Unfortunately, that shouldn't be the way it is, and that doesn't absolve other people for not forcing him to follow the rules. That to me is other people's culpability as well. But if he's like that, then 30 years of experience he's going to still be a rookie by the end of it in terms of handling firearms, essentially, if no one's correcting him. And then, was he drunk, high, or sick? I have no idea. I have seen zero allegations of that. Fun fact about actors, they're always drunk, high, or sick, except when they're acting, because that's the only reason they can get drunk, high, or sick after they're acting, is the money they make. So it tends to be the thing that they're not drunk or high doing. So I kind of would be surprised if he were drunk or high while he was on set. Probably not, is what I would say. And then, or did he lie about this whole thing? I think certainly he's lied about a few details because I think he perceives culpability to be legally one thing when it's not, but that doesn't mean that he's actually legally culpable. So I think what he thinks is that culpability would be if he knew that there was a bullet in there and he fired it anyway. That's not the standard. And in terms of the industry, that's also not the standard. So I think he's been molding the story in such a way that it presents him as having what he perceives to be no culpability in knowing that it would happen when that's not necessarily the standard. So in that sense, I think he's at least slanting certain truths so that they meet that goal, even though he might not be culpable at all from a criminal or civil, well, probably not civil. I'm sure he's culpable civilly. But criminally, he might not be culpable because of the process around him may have failed in all the ways that the process was designed in such a way that he had no role in the process. The details could emerge in that way. I just don't know. So he might end up telling lies or slanted truths to exonerate him from something he did not need to exonerate himself from, if that makes sense. So, yeah, there's that. So yeah, that was the comment that I thought was interesting because there's so much in it, and I was like, this is kind of a nice capsule of like people reacting to things that have so many details that they don't necessarily appreciate the whole breadth and depth of the whole issue. Let's see if there's anything other interesting here. I don't think. Yeah, exactly. It's not established how the gun went off. It isn't. People tell different stories. It's not even established that it was a bullet, oddly enough, as I said in the news segment. We'd hopefully have this information from the coroner, but I don't know if it's in the data dump that came out last week or not. Yeah, let's see. Dershowitz argues that real guns should not be used on set. That's a reasonable argument. I realize they don't have the bang, blah, blah, blah. I've talked about that in my little series as well. I think a lot of people outside of the film community don't understand how extraordinarily prevalent they are and how much failure. That's the thing that I really want to outline in the episode series, the series that I did on this incident, is that it requires a lot of points of failure. Like, and when I say a lot, I mean like it requires everyone around the whole situation to mess up. And these things are bound to happen on a set like that, where people are, frankly, incompetent, irresponsible, uncaring, and poorly treated, and all that kind of stuff, which I think those things are certainly true about the Rust set. So yeah, that's my little reaction to this. I have no idea what the Hill piece says or if it's ridiculous or not. Who knows? But yeah, stay tuned. Maybe if there's a criminal proceeding of anyone, or if there's a civil proceeding of anyone that's being televised, I don't know. Maybe I react to segments of it on the show. Who knows? We'll see. But for now, I'm going to reserve judgment on the whole thing because I think the details are, frankly, extraordinarily hazy. So there we go. All right. I think that's all I got. Anything that came to mind, Ben, that I should talk about?
No.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, again, Nathan's not here, so we don't have a final segment. So thank you for everyone who's stopped by this far. It's been a fun show today, I would say. I had a lot of fun doing it. If you liked any of it, please hit the like button. And please share any portion of any of our show that you find interesting with another person who also might find it interesting. Whether it's about music, gaming, filmmaking, whatever it may be. 909 Crime says, great show. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. And join our Discord. Discord is in the description. You can head over there to drop your own hot takes if you want me to react to them, or any of us to react to them. We love to do that. If you disagree with anything I said, if you hate James Cameron, you think that he should be burned at the stake because he's what is wrong with cinema, I would love to know why. Maybe I end up agreeing with you. I change my mind on things all the time. I don't know. Go to the Discord and espouse your opinions. Yeah, if you don't know, if you're watching on YouTube or on Rumble, we have podcasting platforms. We are on pretty much every podcasting platform, from Pandora to Spotify to TuneIn to Stitcher to Google Podcasts to Apple Podcasts, pretty much everywhere you could possibly think. So you can check us out in audio only form there. And yeah, the last thing, mixedmediapodcast.com. You can find links to everything. And one of those links will be mixedmedia.locals.com, which is a great place where you can support us and help us get this show on the road. I'm going to have an army of interns. That's kind of exciting. And some of that army is going to be kind of, sent this way, I think. We'll see. Which hopefully means some things that I've been meaning to do from a marketing end. It's kind of weird, you do a show like this and you do it for so long and, you're kind of bashing the rock, but then you also know what could help the whole situation go, but you just don't have the time to do it. It's a very frustrating situation, so hopefully I'll have some help to help me along with that process. But yeah, if you support us there are a bunch of perks that you can find there, and hopefully you can ride the growth upward as we grow. So with that, I guess I'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, thanks for listening and for watching.
And cue outro.
Know I'm alright, just look at my life, I'm living alright, I'm nice, I'm alright. Cause looking like Christ, no need for the hype or fight or telephone vipers, no need for the telephone vibe.